Telling me what to do about it. Awesome. And don't worry, we're also going to talk, the trainings that are coming up, some of them are super specific to working with somebody else. So you're going to have we're going to have full conversations, full trainings, hours on how do I implement what I now know working with another human being. So for now, the more that you make it about you, the easier it's going to be to work and communicate with another person. So make it about you, integrate it, and then you'll know exactly how to work with somebody else. And we'll talk very specifically about that, okay? So today we're going to cover really what's probably the most important aspect of this company. We have sort of two core philosophical components as a company that make up really everything we do and that are unique. So they're ours. Ours as a certainly pulling from all kinds of information that's not ours, but in terms of how we're delivering this information, it is specific to us. So that's important, and these are important for you to know, and this is the kind of language that we want to be using unilaterally with all of our clients. Okay, so you can see on this first page I just included kind of an overview, the keys to success. We talked about these yesterday. I'm just going to list them so just to kind of jar our memories. Yesterday we talked about creating new habits and how essentially understanding how the mind and body work, understanding the brain, helps us to know that in order to create any kind of change, what we're really doing is creating new habits. Ultimately, it's just like learning a language. So you wouldn't expect to take a pill or go study 45 minutes a week to learn a new language. You know intuitively that's silly. You also wouldn't expect to get skinny, right? With, I'm going to go to the gym 45 minutes a week and take a pill, and I'm going to be perfect. No, so no, right?
Well, some people do.
Some people try. And that's the thing. This is the model of mental health. This is what everybody expects. That's sort of the point. So you are in the minority of information. You now know that change is impossible in the current system that we have. If change is the target. It may not be. Maybe to feel better. It may be to feel like I'm making a change. Feel like I'm working towards something. But change itself only happens one way. We got to step into the moment, do something different, and then repeat until it becomes integrated. Just like the bike. We don't know how long it's going to take before it's automated, but it will be automated. It's sort of like smart feet they talk about in AA, right? Eventually one day you just go. You just know that's where you're going. You don't think about it. You don't have to think about it. Yoga. You don't have to think about it anymore. It's not about, do I want to go? Do I not want to go? You just go. It just becomes automatic. There's no separation between the mind and the body. Critical for you to know that. When we talk about the mind, what we're talking about is our mental experience. So we're talking about, we're using that word as a way to communicate about thoughts. So when we say mind, we're really saying thoughts, thinking. But in actuality, thoughts are physical, and everything you think ultimately controls, but is physical. It's in your body. And so when we try to separate them, well, the mind doesn't affect the body, and how could a thought, how could changing my thinking make my body different? Well, changing your thinking is making your body different. Literally, if I change my thinking, I'm changing the electrical impulses and the wiring that I'm activating, which is literally controlling the hormones and the neurotransmitter activity throughout the whole system. So we are literally, the mind is the governor of the body. It's the governor. Now, that's really important for you to know for today, because we're going to talk a lot about how the mind affects the body in our lives day to day. So think of the mind as the governor. There's really only a few exceptions. So your thoughts are the governor of the body. They're the governor of your experience. And then there are times when the body takes over the mind. In other words, the body gets spooked. So when your survival instinct is activated, body gets spooked, and then it's in charge. You don't know that. You don't experience it as, now my body's driving this car. You experience it as fear. You experience it as heartbeat increases. You start to breathe a little bit differently. So under all conditions, even if it's because all of a sudden I start thinking about how my rent is due and I don't have the money, That's a security issue, and it's a thought-induced security issue. So it's not because I saw a lion and it's about to come after me. That would also induce the same circuitry. But most of the time in our world now, we're not being scared by lions chasing us. We're being scared by what's in our heads, by how we see what is happening in our lives. So we're going to talk also a little bit today, although we're not going to get so far into it, about if thoughts and emotions influence the body, can we use that information to heal the body? That's kind of a whole other conversation, but it's something to keep in the back of your head, because research tells us now that the answer is yes. And we all know that, like you kind of know that intuitively. Doctors will tell you, let's say that someone has been told they have cancer, and those that kind of obsess in fear and depression have a different lifespan than those who decide, like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go live my best life now. Kind of accept it, come to terms with it, and then end up living many years longer than they were expected to. So we know these things, and we see them all over the place. We just don't sort of really think long and hard about what they mean. I told you yesterday that the most important thing you'll ever hear me say is that thoughts are mood dependent, and that's true. That'll always be true. In other words, your mood is determining what thoughts you have access to, and as long as you manage your mood as your primary target, you have access to that hope, to that possibility, to that limitlessness. So if you improve your mood, you increase control of your life. You do that because when I feel like I can do whatever it is I want to do, that's a power spot. We feel like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. The more that we think that way, the more control we feel like we have, as opposed to the other way, which is, I can't, I couldn't, there's no way, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I don't have enough education. That's the other way, and that's a limiting mindset, because we only see what we can do or what we really can't do. Your focus, your attention is your locus of control, not your action. We talked about that yesterday. In other words, most people think that to be happy, I have to organize the circumstances of my life the way I want. So to be happy, my husband has to behave the way I want him to, my daughter needs to fall in line, otherwise I can't be happy. But in actuality, all I have to do is not look at what I don't want to see in my husband and interact with my daughter differently, focus on what I love about her, not what I don't like about it, and that changes everything. So you can use your focus. You don't have to react the way that you react, and you can change that at any time. So our first thought is typically a reaction, and that may not be voluntary. That's an automatic, that's automated already. But our second thought is always a choice. So if you're mindful enough, and that's what we're going to talk a ton about today, mindfulness and what we really mean when we say that, if you're mindful enough, you have control over your attention and focus. And that's what this is all about. So those are the sort of big highlights from yesterday. Yesterday, I also asked you to try to remain present, to pay attention to your inner dialogue, to the thoughts that you're thinking as we go through this couple hours today. That you work on judgment, that critical voice of self or others or of anything, institutions, systems, that critical narrating voice. Can you notice it and maybe try to reframe, to not be as judgmental, but that curious observer, like, oh, that's interesting, instead of, oh, again? I failed again, right? That kind of thing. And that's really important, because as we start drawing our attention to what we want to change about ourselves, that can be a trap. We can get very frustrated because we're trying to make this effort and it's not happening in the timeline we think it should. And then we feel it's like shit. So this is something you really have to start to watch. Yesterday I asked you to watch the complaining and the judgment and the verbal, the sort of the saying, your words are extremely powerful, and there will be times, I'm just going to remind myself of something. There will be other trainings where we spend much more time on the power of words and what makes them so powerful. But it has a lot to do with how our brain uses language. And typically, when somebody says something, our brain grounds that as a fact. It grounds it in physical space. Well, he said. So it's like we see it as a physical thing almost, what we say. So it's really important when we start saying something out loud, and this is why, like, accountability. If I'm trying to stay sober and I don't tell anybody, I don't say it out loud, it's like, well, maybe I could have a couple of beers. And they don't know I was trying. So it's super easy to, like, kind of lie to yourself. But when I start saying, no, I'm committed to sobriety right now. I'm going to do a year of sobriety. I'm going to, all of a sudden, they act as accountability sort of sources for us. And it grounds in our minds, no, I really am. I'm really doing this. So it's just this constant sort of like reinforcement that we're, using words to do for us. Now, that can also work against us. If I'm doing a lot of complaining, I can be working super hard to make this great change in my life and then undermining it every step of the way by activating those old networks. So as soon as I start saying, motherfucking this asshole, done, right? Done. Because those words are activating the old systems. And this is what makes change so tricky. I mean, we just have to have that steadfast commitment. Otherwise, we find ourselves, they say, resting on your laurels. But ultimately, what that amounts to is falling back into old patterns, quite literally. So I want you today, though, instead of the critical language, can you focus on, this is for the week, really, the week ahead. Two things I want you to be mindful of. Starting to be aware of what's the story that I tell. What is my story that I'm telling about myself? So just again, curious, fun. We're not judging that story. We're not saying, but you notice, like, when we first meet somebody, we're married to our stories. Well, tell me about yourself. Well, I was born here, and I went to school here. My parents were like this. And again, we're using our words to ground this truth into this is who I am. And then it gives us, because part of the survival instinct is continuity, the illusion of certainty. In other words, everything in our lives, we use structures like calendars, dates, planning. All of that is designed to give human beings certainty. This is really going to happen. This is what's going on Monday at 9 o'clock. I'm going to meet McKenna here. Oh, okay, I know what I'm doing on Monday. Some of us are comfortable with uncertainty, others are not. But certainty and uncertainty are really important in the human experience because this is what makes us feel safe. So it's a survival thing. So there is a strong, and I mean tremendous effort in you to stay continuous to your story. So once you create this narrative, there's a part of you that's like, nah, I got to stay in the narrative. I can't break out of the narrative. I'm not a rich person. I could never be one of those rich assholes. Rich people are assholes. They're all arrogant and they have to step on people to succeed. These kinds of things. You start telling stories like that, there's a part of you that goes, well, I would never want to make money. I better stay away from money. That's going to make me an asshole. Now, all of us have these narratives. They're in there. That's the cognitive bias that the bike video highlighted yesterday. So we're all contending with them and will be throughout the rest of our lifetime. So we have to just start to notice, where are they for us? Where are these stories that are not serving us anymore? In childhood, certain stories are useful. They make us feel empowered, or they give us a sense of self. They even give us a sense of self-worth. But as we get into adulthood, because the norms have changed, expectations have changed, and our goals are changed, now we're in charge. As kids, we don't really have a say. Like, our parents have a certain amount of money. They make the decisions. We eat what's in the house. We don't have control. But as we step into adulthood, these decisions are all, we have to make them. Like, what food do I want to keep in my apartment? I mean, we don't think about this stuff, but this is like, we have to make every choice for ourselves. And so starting to think, like, what worked when I was little may not work now. I better start looking at these stories because they are shaping every aspect of my life. When I'm on autopilot, the story is what's driving, the narrative is what's driving my automatic processing, keeping me in that box. So it's really important. And finally, and this is practical. So think of this final one as really like in the moment. I'm in the present activity that you have to catch. Because we're going to eventually move into these thought disturbances. And these are really important. So in the week ahead, can you stop analyzing what you think somebody else thinks of you? Or what somebody else thinks, period. Maybe not about you, but what somebody else thinks. So I wonder, well, maybe I'll choose this place to eat lunch. Well, I don't know, and maybe McKenna wouldn't like that place, and I don't know, maybe she has an allergy, maybe she's vegan, so maybe I shouldn't choose that place. Anytime that you think, even for a good reason, that you're evaluating somebody else's opinion over yours, pay attention. That's extremely important. So in other words, when you're in somebody else's head, anytime you're in somebody else's head trying to figure out what they got going on, for any reason, watch for that. Yeah? All right.
So someone else's opinion over your own, you're saying. So, I mean, because I was being considerate. I thought this is a positive thing to like take other into consideration and stuff like that.
So be careful with positive, negative. Because in actuality, there really is this isn't good and bad. It's not positive, negative. It's just moving me forward or keeping me where I am. So good and bad, these no longer matter. We're not thinking in terms, because these are all relative. Okay. It might be, somebody out there might say, well, how dare you not put my feelings first? If you're in a partnership, any kind of relationship, I promise you, they're not going to want to hear that you're putting yourself first. So it's not about good and bad, and that can get us tripped up. This is about, and I'm asking, before you put a judgment on it, not to assess right and wrong or good and bad, just to notice every time you're accessing that part of you that's thinking about what somebody else is thinking about. Okay? So even if you think it's justified.
Good.
Yeah? And even if it's like, oh, I wonder if Sam wants some help carrying her bags. Even though I'm not saying that. I'm just saying notice. Because we need that power. We need you to have that power to notice it, to be able to notice it. All right, so let's move into this discussion about the 3 A's. So in order to frame the conversation about this really important concept of what mindfulness is in the definition we're using, because let's be honest, right? Mindfulness is now the most overused phrase on the planet, and nobody really knows what it means.
True.
Right? So and everybody has a different idea about what it means, and so we're going to define that very clearly for us in how we intend to use it, because it is incredibly important. It is the how of our story. It's our company how. So how do I make this change? I mean, tell me what to do. That question should immediately elicit the words 3 A's of mindfulness, because eventually that information will be totally integrated. You'll know exactly what that means. And that's the first step in understanding how. How am I going to make a change? You got to have these 3 things. And then everything else. Then from there, it's practical interventions to create those 3 things. So we'll talk about that. The first thing I want you to know is that we are in the midst of what I think of as like a cultural epidemic of unhappiness. It's everywhere. And once you have an eye for it, this is sort of, I think, what really motivates me is just this deep sadness right here that I see when I look out into the world. People in general feel very victimized by the world. They feel, you see it everywhere. So I took myself off of the dating profile, but I was on there. And in the the quickest, they ask you, it was Hinge, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Hinge, but they ask you to in the beginning as you're setting up your profile, they ask you to choose out of this, these questions that you can then put the answers to on your profile. So it'll be like, what's one thing that you think about before bed? I mean, it's super random and they're not, profound. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen this, or what's one of your pet peeves? It's the slow walkers. I mean, it's like, Now most people just take that at face value. Not me. I see the word slow walker and I go, oh, victim, we're not going to go near that guy. Because clearly, if that's something that is bothersome enough to put on your profile, one of two things. One, you have an exceptional negativity bias. You're walking around looking for things to make you unhappy. Two, you have no problem announcing that to everybody on the planet, and you assume this is your source of connection. Complaining is how I'm going to connect with you. And number three, if slow walkers are bothering you, what am I going to do to you when I say, I don't like you, I don't like that, I don't want to go to that movie, I don't like that for lunch? What's that going to feel like if you can't tolerate the person who walks too slow in front of you? So you start to see what I'm saying. People will give you clues all day, every day, where they're really at. And eventually you guys are going to become masterful at seeing a person in minutes, knowing exactly where they are, and then starting to learn how to move them forward, if that's what they want. Assuming that's what they want. If they don't want that, then then it's irrelevant.
They can walk past it.
Yeah, right. That's right. Move.
Yeah.
So the average person is estimated to have about an 80-20 split. 80% of their wiring is sort of grounded in that negativity bias.
That's amazing.
And 20% of that is positive. So you can see we're way more. 8 out of every 10 thoughts is more likely to be negative than positive. The other interesting thing is it's between different estimates, just between 92 and 98% of your thoughts today are the same as yesterday. So when we talk about change and habit and how much we live on autopilot, it's astounding. I think I mentioned, no, I didn't mention this yesterday. McKenna certainly has heard me say this. In the 1950s, it's when psychology was really born and started to become used. That's when mass marketing and businesses got a hold of psychology. And because they had just started creating all these inventories, research, evidence-based surveys to ask people questions to get the information and then make sense of it clinically, psychologically. So there was all this big push in how it exists, all this data. So, for example, everybody that was going into college had to fill out these personality inventories as part of the application process. So in the 1950s, there was this one study at I forget, it might have been Stanford, at one university, major university, where the incoming freshmen were asked a bunch of questions. One of the questions was, do you make an effort to keep goals? Do you keep daily goals? Do you keep annual goals? Do you have 5-year goals? And I think it was 3%. That might be a little off, but it was a very small percentage of this giant incoming class. So they followed this class out, 5 years, 10 years. And at 10 years out, the net worth of that combined 3% was more than the entire other 97%. Because, just like the GPS example yesterday, if we don't give ourselves clarity about where we're trying to go, we default to reacting to whatever we see in front of us. So if I was trying to drive my car without the GPS to San Diego and just started responding to the street signs, okay, that says west, all right, I'll go that way. Well, that says west, okay, I'll go that way. We could end up in a full circle, depending on how we react in that space. We could probably drive around for the rest of our lives, guaranteed there are people who aren't going to make it to San Diego. So that's kind of how the brain operates. If we don't program into it what we're trying to get done today, then we're just going to wind up kind of going in whatever direction feels like, the one that's most urgent in the moment now. Mm-hmm. So what ultimately has transpired is we've gotten into sort of like the habit of suffering, the habit of unhappiness. I talked yesterday about this idea that we have confused getting what we want, desire, for happiness. It is a well-proven fact that happiness is merely a state of mind, and that getting things doesn't make people happy. That's not, you guys all know that from your personal experiences. We've all said, oh, I just want a boyfriend, or I just want a girlfriend, or just, all I really want is a relationship, all I really want is to get married, all I really want is a giant whatever, all I really want is graduate from this, all I really want is this certification. And it just doesn't work, because as soon as we get there, I mean, almost before the certification is in our hand, we switch to something else. You have to know that the mind is always going to do that, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to build stuff, and create stuff, and just to keep going. We're not here to stop. Oh, I'm happy now I got married. That's just not how it works. So happiness has to be something we cultivate in its own right. We cultivate happiness because I want to be joyful. Now, here's a secret. This is not, I'm not trying to say this to incentivize you, but it is the truth. If you were to put all of your effort and attention into living joyfully, you also get whatever you want. Because your brain is so hopeful, is so focused on, it lives, you start living in this 20% positive. It starts getting bigger, 30%, 40%. Now it's informing how you see the world. And instead of somebody on the subway seeming like a threat to me or scary, now you seem like somebody I could talk to. And now we start talking, and it turns out you have an opportunity for me. I'm like, oh my God, let me get your number. And now I get a job because I spoke to you. So that which used to be a threat, you don't realize when you're operating from a fear place how scared. There's studies that have also shown if you put a bunch of people in a room, those that have confidence, that rank really high on a confidence scale, if we were to take 200 people, throw us in a pretty small room, had a group of people show up really well dressed that looked like movers and shakers, and we put them into the crowd, and we had them operating like a little herd into the space, those that are confident will have positioned themselves by the end of the hour near those people, and those that are not and that are really insecure will all be as far away in the room, totally subconsciously, absolutely outside of your conscious awareness. But that's how you kind of think about a metaphor for life. If we're walking around afraid to be seen, if we're walking around feeling not good enough, then we're not positioning ourselves subconsciously to be seen. We're actually saying, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. You know, and in treatment settings, you see that a lot. Like literally, we'll have clients that have hoodies and are like in a ball, don't look at me, you know. So, but this is not just people who have clinical, diagnoses. This is everyone. So, just some numbers, right? Anxiety is the most common mental illness in the U.S. It affects 40 million adults, ages 18 and older. That's in 18% of the population, but now that's, of course, those that seek help. So those numbers you can assume, are much higher in reality. I can tell you off the top of my head that I know more people that have anxiety that are not aware of it, or as many people in my personal life, not including clients, as I do who do. And who very clearly, in some cases, the ones that have not been diagnosed are far more anxious. They just have kind of like mastered how to control it in a way that's adaptive. Yeah. It's the leading cause of disability in the U.S. for folks ages 15 to 44. That's anxiety. Now, MDD, which is major depressive disorder, affects more than 16.1 American adults, about 7% of the population ages 18 and older. And again, this is diagnosed. To be diagnosed with major depressive disorder, you have to be pretty depressed. And really what we're saying, what mental health really means is you didn't, in some way to me, they're like the healthier. They're the healthier because they see that there's something wrong with the system and they just can't bring themselves to engage in it. Something is wrong. So they're sort of in a way healthier because they're sort of saying, there is something that feels really wrong about me going into that situation. So much so I can't force myself to do it. So I must be broken. Now, when you think about it, it certainly begs the question, could we argue that the system is broken and that maybe my reaction is justified or maybe even more healthy than those that are like, yeah, I'm gonna buckle down and like get it done, right? The system, because that's really what we're saying. We're saying those that are ill are the ones that can't function successfully in society as we have sort of situated it. Depression is more prevalent in women than men, but we also need to tell you that men are a lot less likely to seek treatment than women are. That's changing a little bit, but really only with substance use disorders. So let's talk now about, I just wanted you to kind of get a little overview there, but numbers aren't so important. Let's talk about the body when we get distressed. So, first, before I even get into that, what would you say are some of the like basic ways that you would describe the culture of the United States? What are like cultural norms of the U.S.?
Ambition.
Ambition? What else?
Conflict, I think, or assertiveness.
Assertiveness? Yeah. Independence, I think, is typically like...
Yeah, individuality.
Individuality, yes.
It's kind of like ambition, but like being the best.
Yes, winning.
Yeah.
Competitiveness.
Yeah.
Being the best. We are the best. We're the U.S. What else? You think of anything else? Certainly, like success, right? So ambition, I think, material success.
Yeah.
Most people, if you ask them like to define success, they say that. And it's funny because even when you ask people and they say things like, well, to be happy, they say that, but then when you dig a little deeper, what they're really saying is to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
What about New York City? What are some of the cultural norms of this city specifically?
Diversity.
Yeah, I think it's every language spoken in the world is spoken here.
So like gregariousness or like outspokenness, like that's like.
Yeah, totally.
Outspokenness.
Yeah,
Is that what
like
you
a New
mean?
Yorker trade, if you see like portrayed in movies and stuff, it's like a bombastic like.
That's
Like,
right.
thing.
Like unapologetically.
Yeah.
Or
What is that? What is that?
Yeah. It's
What
like
is
a
that?
confidence, but it's like a.
Assertiveness.
Yeah.
I don't know what is that though. Like there's a definite like word that I like. Bombastic was I think closer to me. What was the first word you used?
Gregarious? That's more like friendly.
I feel like that's more friendly. So it's not necessarily friendly. It can be friendly.
Yeah.
I just had a good word.
What is the word? Like, okay, so we know what we mean. Like maybe like outspoken. You said, right? Somebody said
Yeah.
outspoken, opinionated. Okay, so opinionated, not afraid to speak their mind.
I was gonna say like righteous, but that's not right.
There is some righteousness, or more like we're the only place that matters in the world. I don't know what that is. Nationalism or something. What else?
Fast paced.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
And if you're not overworking, you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, hard work.
Yeah, it's super rewarded if you say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hard
How
work.
busy you are.
Yeah.
Everybody's so busy, right? You can like, you'll move here. I know I moved here to see like my friends from college. We lived in the same apartment. I saw her maybe like 5 times the entire time we lived together. We never saw each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody lives in Brooklyn, forget it. They're like in Antarctica. Like you're never going ever. You know, like might as well be.
Yeah.
would like drinking and stuff go along with it? It's like a drinking culture, but
It's a drinking culture. It's an adult city.
Yeah.
I think it goes along with like the social part.
Yeah, like the
Work
image.
hard, play hard.
Yeah.
And like the image of the Sex and the City martini, you know, like the brunch, the champagne brunches, and drinking is very much it's really an adult city.
Yeah.
Like it's not, you don't think kids when you think of New York City, you think of, it's like Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
What else?
I mean, all that stuff on the left.
Very
also.
wealthy. I mean, it's very rich, like
It's a wealthy city.
wealthy city.
It certainly is.
Oh, I was with this client, and she was like, "What are you even doing in New York?" She comes from like a wealthy family, and she was like, "What do you even like?" Because she was like talking about her friends. She's in the art world, and like friends like all in the fashion and stuff. Yeah, and she's like, "Well, why don't you just like?" She was being sincere though. Like, "Why don't you just move to Colorado?" And it really got me thinking that whole day.
Well, that's so
Why don't
interesting.
you want to do the yoga thing? Why don't you just move to like Colorado? Or
Well, that's a great question. So it's a good question for you to ask yourself.
Yeah.
'Cause there's a reason,
Yeah.
right?
No, yeah. So I totally took it serious. But that was the thing. It's like, I've heard comments before too. My manager at Brooklyn Mines, he was like, he's the accounting guy. And we were talking about, I was doing administrative work, so he was talking about wages with somebody, and he's like, "Oh, you're not making $80,000. That's like poverty in New York." Meanwhile, I'm making like way less than that.
Yeah.
And I was like, but that's just like the mentality, and he's, you know.
Yeah, so why do people stay here? Why might I, let's say that I'm, same thing, right? I have that kind of like, more like that Colorado sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Why would I stay in New York City?
To achieve that.
To achieve.
Right, to feel motivated.
To succeed, to achieve, because there's a part of me that, you're driven.
The American dream.
The dream, I want to be the best. I want to be thought of as the best at whatever it is I do. The top, right?
Yeah, and that's how you feel like all the top people are here.
Yeah.
Like everyone.
Well, right, if you can make it here, right? So this is right. So this is really like a great way to sort of think about New York City. It's also dubbed the city that never sleeps. Yeah. So when we think about stress, let's talk about the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system for a moment. So the central nervous system, which is really just the brain and the spinal cord and the brainstem. This is, what most of us, when we talk about the brain, this is really what we think about. The sort of all drug use is affecting the CNS primarily. That's what changes your experience. All mental activity is through CNS. The autonomic nervous system is the smooth muscle, the heart, and the glands. This is the auto-functioning. This is what happens. This is breathing. This is, heart rate. This is stuff that's going on you'll never, ever have any conscious awareness of. So there's two pieces to your autonomic nervous system. I should also mention it was historically thought of that there was only two. There now is believed to be a third called the enteric nervous system, and this is the gastria. This is what I was talking about when I said there's a new nervous system specific to the brain's relationship with the stomach. So when we talk about anxiety and being in the stomach, we now know that the brain has a direct link to your stomach. Direct link. So if you're subconsciously very nervous about something, you could have GI problems and never know there's a relationship between them, but that would be very valid and real, right? So if somebody says, I have all these stomach problems, and you're like, well, maybe you have anxiety. You're like, yeah, but I have real stomach problems. It's not just in my head. Nothing is just in your head. Let me be very clear. So there's two pieces to the autonomic nervous system. You have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is basically activation. This is the accelerator. This is your fight, flight, or freeze. This is it. This is where the body automatically looks for threats, and if it experiences a threat, it's activated. It can be activated before you have any conscious awareness of what a threat is. So let's go back to our hunter and gatherer roots. So, and just to kind of put this in a timeline, we were hunter and gatherers, if you look at your sheet, for about 250,000 years. So that's what it's believed to be. Assuming that you believe that evolution is a real thing.
Some hard wiring. 250,000 years of...
Exactly. So now you start to see the problem. 250,000 years. So let's look at the timeline. On a timeline, let's say that's here, right? We were agricultural for 10,000. So we'll put that in here. And so how long would you say we're modern, we're industrialized?
2000? I don't know, I guess the Greece, 2,500 years.
So it's, right, so it's about, exactly. So you'd say, maybe you could argue like, the Rome, the Greece, so it's about 2,500. However, one of the biggest and most influential advancements in human history, believe it or not, was the light bulb. The light bulb was 139 years ago. Why do you think the light bulb was such an important contributor to human beings?
It mimics daylight.
Because it mimics daylight. So it was the first time that we could put the lights on all the time. Now, up until then, our natural body clock, you woke up with the sun and you went to sleep when the sun went down. Real simple. Can't hunt at night, can't gather at night. So for 250,000 years, the vast majority of our experience, we lived as hunter and gatherers. You have to start to get a sense. We've been modernized the way we understand it for a couple hundred to a couple thousand, a tiny little handful. So evolution has not caught up with how we live today. Now that's important because as a hunter and gatherer, what were your threats? What were the threats to us as hunter and gatherers? So let's say we're a tribe. We're a tribe, and let's say there's like another 20 of us.
Other tribes.
Okay, so other tribes, right? So territory, things like that. Actually, hunter and gatherers, there was no territory. We were always moving. So we really didn't stay in one spot because you'd exhaust resources, and so you always were moving to get food. Okay, so other tribes, maybe, right?
Wild animals?
Wild animals. How did we survive wild animals?
Fight.
Fight, yeah. But if I was, would I fight, would just be me fighting?
Mm-mm.
No. We survived as a community. So the tribe was how you survived. Could not survive on your own. So for 250,000 years, we needed each other, not just because it's nice to be around people and because, I like people and make me feel good. Because if you didn't, you were dead. You would not survive. So you have to think about it. Evolution, right? The principle of evolution is what? What is the principle of evolution?
Survival of the fittest.
Which means?
Only the strong survive.
Well, it means, that's right. The stronger traits, the traits that keep you alive, survive, and the ones that are not survival oriented die because you don't procreate. They don't make it to the next level. So this concept of wanting and needing to care about other people think is hardwired into you because that's how we survived for all this time. I needed you to like me so that we could make babies and have a community and stay alive. So it's really important. It's actually a survival drive directly. So when you're thinking about these conversations, it's super important to frame them in this idea of how long we lived in this way. Now, 139 years ago, I think it was like 1890, don't quote me on that, somewhere around there, that light bulb basically became in every household. So it went from, yes, it was accessible to now everybody has one. And it changed it because it turned the lights on at night. So now for the first time, the lights could be on 24 hours a day. So here's how this all fits together. So when we perceive a threat in the environment, so let's say we're our tribe, we're hanging out, the men just came back from the kill, we just cooked up this giant feast, and now we're all kind of hanging around the campfire, getting ready for bed, and someone's telling stories, and the kids are laughing and playing. So right at that point, we are in our parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. We just had a crazy day. We're digesting, we're resting, we're having fun, right? But now all of a sudden, we're hanging out, and just outside of the tribe, off in the darkness, we hear a rustling. like right in the bushes, what would happen? Right away, what's the first thing that would happen?
Look. Yeah.
Right. So immediately when you do that, you activate the sympathetic nervous system. Now that has happened much more quickly than we have the conscious ability to know. So we heard that our whole system, as soon as that sound was active, happened much more quickly than we even caught it. So now what? So our body reacts and we go, our muscles freeze and tense up. Do we need to freeze? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Instantly, heartbeat changes. Our breathing changes because oxygen needs to leave where it has been and is pumped into the parts of our body and brain that are going to need the resources to fight or run. Blood rushes to the limbs to prepare to fight or run, right? Pupils dilate, all of our senses sharpen. So all of our resources, all of our energy is getting dumped into survival mode, automatic mode. We might shake, smells intensify. Is there a threat? What is the threat? What's really happening? So we go into survival mode, period. Now, makes sense. What happens if it's a lion, right? Well, if it's a lion, we fight or we run. If it's a bunny, we go and we relax. Now this is important because all creatures in nature are designed to withstand this reaction. It's actually healthy in a certain dose. But for every activation of this, there should be an equal amount of rest. Okay. So of course, historically, we were built to survive in the face of a threat, right? The threat of attack. But for most people living in New York City, what percentage of time out of a 24-hour workday would you guess that they're activating their sympathetic nervous system?
14, 16 hours.
Probably about 14 hours, yeah. Yep. There are some people, because now, as we've evolved, our threats are not lions and tigers. So what are some of the threats that we perceive now in modern day 2019 American culture in New York City?
Emails.
What else?
But I'm not far enough along. I'm not making it fast enough.
Comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get eventually to the big picture assessment stuff. Yeah, self-analysis. That's really what that is. Self-analysis, stopping and taking kind of an overview of where you are. Yep.
Crazy people, to be honest. I mean, just walking around,
Yeah.
you always have to be aware where you're walking.
The threats of people, the unknown. There's so many people everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep. What else? The sound of a text message coming in. Sound of social media. Seeing your friends on social media. Maybe not so much all of us, but for the clients that we work with, when they go on social media and they see their friends like hanging out on a boat, they're just desperate, like you described. There's just this, I'm not far along enough, or I'm not having fun, I'm not cool, I'm not this, I'm not that. So social media is a real activator.
Phone calls. I just read an article about how young kids and some millennials are terrified to answer the phone because they've never had to because everyone texts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's sure, of course. It's an epidemic.
Like having to get on the phone and talk to someone.
Yeah.
It's almost like a faux pas now. Yeah. I just saw a thing like people, it was like one of those funny articles, but like if you're under 40 and someone calls you without saying they're gonna call you, like texting like, yeah, I'm gonna call you.
Yeah.
It's like a faux pas now. It's like a social faux pas.
Absolutely. I'm in that camp too.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, don't bother me, I'm doing something. I didn't plan to call. I didn't plan to talk to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so you start to get the picture. I mean, the cell phone itself will ultimately become probably the next light bulb when we look back 130 years from now, because it's now a walking activation device. It is a walking stress device. That is what it is. Every time you look at it, and its fundamental design, it is designed to activate you.
Yeah.
Intentionally. That is what it does. So, you start to get the picture. Now, here's what you need to know for our purposes also. High performance. So you guys are going to meet, those of you that haven't met Adam Pellegrini. Adam is one of our current and probably our most active integrated wellness coach right now. He is a biohacker. So biohacking essentially is the theory that we treat everybody nutritionally, individually, based on their ancestry. So if you were from Africa and I was from, Canada, whatever, that we would have different needs in terms of what to put in our body, what our body can, what optimizes health internally for us. But Adam also looks at lifestyle. So how do we optimize the physical to create the most optimal mental? So he and I work together. You could see it really easily. This is kind of the whole model of what we do. It's a holistic health model at its core. It's very individualized to each of us, saying and recognizing that one approach to diet and exercise doesn't work because it's insane and ridiculous. Not everybody has the same needs. So we're sort of where our company is designed to sort of deal with that idea, both from the food side, the exercise side, and then the mental side. Now, what Adam also teaches is the fundamental and most critical part of any sort of performance-based psychology is sleep. Is sleep, is rest. All healing, mental or physical, happens in rest. So think about every doctor, the cliche, what do doctors say to you when you go in and tell them you are sick? Across the board, every doctor that's ever lived, what do they say? They're like, oh, I don't feel good, I have a cold, doc. What do they say?
Rest.
Get rest, right? Drink some water and get some rest. Oh, you have the flu? Go get some rest, get some rest, get some rest, get some rest. Because they know that the only way you are going to heal, your body cannot heal unless you are activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So all rest, all healing, and all digestion is going to happen over here. This is really, 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 really important stuff. When we looked, sports psychology, there's the godfather of sports psychology, talks a lot about this concept of why athletes have it so much easier than the average person. What do you think the reason is? Why would it be so much easier for an athlete to succeed versus the standard corporate, employee?
Concrete goals. And there's stuff to work for.
Absolutely. So, right, singleness of purpose. I am a left-handed specialist in Major League Baseball. My goal is throw a ball over this area right here, right? So when the catcher puts down the sign, my job is to use my left arm to throw the ball in that spot. So now what? Now we know what the objective is. Everything in my life is designed to support that objective. Why else? That's only one. Why else would athletes have an easier time with optimizing performance?
It's scheduled into their day-to-day.
So their whole life is scheduled and structured to support the goal, right? So they have this clarity about what they're designed to do, what we're here to do, and their whole life is set up to support that goal. Every aspect of it. Yep. And then there's one more.
Yeah, outside kind of validation. I don't know. Usually people like a coach or something.
Sleep.
Okay.
So if you've ever been a part of, I went to a Division I college for 2 years because I wanted to go to a Division I football school. That's the reason I was there. Well, I was glad I did it. It was extremely eye-opening on many, many levels. But getting to be around, sort of watch how these athletes were treated was really fucking interesting. I mean, the very first day I was in an art history class, the teacher asked who the athletes were. It was a huge lecture. I mean, this was University of South Carolina. There was, 25,000 undergraduates. So that, because they're the ones that give the most money to the university, essentially she was like, I need to protect my athletes because that's how my art program gets funded. Wild stuff, right? And you can see them all a quarter mile away because they have like giant brandings on their they're these giant humans and with these crazy marks all over them. It's wild stuff. But ultimately, they have really strict schedules and curfews. You have to be, coach says, in bed, lights out, 10 o'clock. Every single night. And if you were hanging around athletes, because sometimes they'd come out on the weekends when they didn't have to do whatever, you could see they were always, no, I'm in season, I'm not eating that, I'm not drinking that. They were really like the only ones you would see without a cup, and that would be fine if they didn't have a cup at the keg party because they were the athletes. So the whole culture of athletics recognizes that in order to be a high performer, sleep is critical. Now, one of the things that, and if you watch the flow videos, which we're going to talk a lot about, how do we create the ideal flow state? One of the big pieces when we talk about optimal performance is obviously sleep hygiene. So nutrition, sleep hygiene. Which leads us to our most important discussion. So these 3 A's of mindfulness. This is the central tenet of our company's model and framework and philosophy. Earlier I mentioned that mindfulness is a word that is excessively overused and that has different meanings for everyone. So when I say that word, what comes to mind? What's like the first thing that you think of when you hear mindfulness?
Living in the present.
Yeah. So being in the present, okay?
Like Eastern kind of philosophy.
Eastern philosophy, yeah.
Think of yoga.
Yoga.
And breathing.
Meditation.
Anything else? So, So, the word mindfulness originally was a Buddhist term. It's referenced in Buddhism to describe a state of being. And it's a state of being that you cultivate through meditation. Ultimately, how we define it typically in the West is to be paying attention in a very specific way, on purpose and non-judgmentally. So I'm saying, all right, I'm going to pay attention. I'm paying attention to my thoughts. And if you think about meditation, that's what it is. You close your eyes, right? We close our eyes, by the way, because billions of bits of information comes through the eyes. The eyes are by far the biggest filter of sensory input from our environment, well over the other senses. I think it's like about 80%. So just opening your eyes in a place like New York City basically puts the brain in a stress-inducing state. Your brain activity is so hyperactive because it's contending with so much information. Just standing in New York City and looking at people moving is activating a stress response. I mean, it's crazy, but it's true. So when we close our eyes, that's really important. We have to stop that flow of all that information, and we almost immediately drop. Almost immediately. So if you close your eyes and take a nice deep breath, you just brought all of that information down. So this idea of paying attention on purpose and in a non-judgmental way. When they say non-judgment, they really mean objective. So not just, in other words, we're not talking about being positive either. We're talking about a neutral sort of frame of mind. Mm-hmm. I like to think of that as like curious, like a natural curiosity. Like, oh, interesting. Like I'm kind of looking at something. I'm not making a determination one way or the other. Now, non-determination in Buddhism is exceptionally important because Buddhism, the whole framework of Buddhism, is based on and built on the idea of non-attachment. that we're one with all things. There's no hierarchy, there's no separation. That me and the table are made up of the same energy. So for them, not claiming something or not making a determination, good or bad, one or the other, is really important as part of the framework. So that's why it's non-judgment. For our purposes, so when we say mindfulness, what we're really looking at are three different aspects. So when I say the 3 A's of mindfulness, it's how this company defines the term. So what we just talked about is what mindfulness really is. That's the history of the term. It's a Buddhist term that refers to being in that certain state. Very, very simple. It can also trigger lots of other associations that are obvious, like you guys mentioned. For us, it means 3 things. So, we're saying that there are 3 A's to the word mindfulness. So when we say mindfulness, we really mean 3 things. These also are the 3 things that ultimately are going to create the change experience. These are your vehicles for change. And we need all 3. So the first is awareness. Mindfulness is awareness. Again, listening. So awareness is learning to listen. This is that idea of putting space between me and my thoughts. So I don't feel like my thoughts are me. Typically, the average person has a thought, and their body is reacting to the thought. So they're in their head talking to themselves and having this whole thing happening. You can see it on the subway often. Someone's in their head, like outer space, like, just twirling in their minds. In that experience, there's no separate. You and your thoughts are having this experience simultaneously. You are your thoughts. What we're saying here with awareness, we're saying we want you to slow down so that you can hear your own thoughts. So while I'm sitting in a situation, whether I'm in an AA meeting, whether I'm on the subway, I start to be able to notice my reactions. I start to be able to notice my patterns of thinking, because they're all patterns. We're so habituated, and the only way to create new habits is to become aware of what I'm doing now. Gotta know what I'm doing. Like in the world of addiction, if I don't acknowledge that I have a problem, then I can't make any changes to it because I didn't even acknowledge it existed. So this is sort of basic, right? Makes perfect sense. The challenge we face, though, is it's not, we have these thought disturbances that are extremely overactive. So I'm going to mention them now, but I'm not going to explain them in great detail because this is days of material. So there are 7 identified patterns that people are typically in their thoughts. One is past and future thinking. Pretty self-explanatory. Most people, the average person doesn't know there is a present. They literally flip in and out of past, future, past, future, past, future. Yesterday, later, 2 months ago, 10 years ago. If the less... So I have a lot of friends from high school who never went on to get any kind of education, and they're wonderful, some of my best friends in the whole world. But you really see this one alive and well in this population, and it's intense to sort of see alive and well in front of you playing out.
I like the, it's a quote, I can't remember, but life is what happens to you when you're planning your future.
Right.
I love it. It's just so...
That's great.
It's a really good one.
Yeah, I like that a lot too.
I don't know who said it. John Lennon.
Sorry? Oh, John Lennon, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, right. And the other thing that people do when they are present is they're only half present. So it's, maybe I'm not. So let's say like I'm in a class setting. And in the classroom setting, I'm listening to the professor. But what most people are doing is actually splitting their attention. So probably what's a more likely scenario in that case would be, I'm sitting with my friend at a restaurant. And if I have no awareness of the present, as they're talking, I'm judging. They're talking to me, and I'm going, oh God, another one of those guys. Oh, she did it again. Oh, yeah, that's it. Or I'm thinking, oh my God, did she notice that I just rolled my eyes, and maybe she thinks that, or she's being weird. Maybe she's mad at me. Maybe what did I do? So as we're in the present, my mind is somewhere else. Instead of being engaged in the moment, I'm off somewhere else. There's a lot of reasons why that happens, and we can talk about them another time. But just for now, know that one of the patterns is past and future thinking, is fundamentally being out of the present. Another thought disturbance, this one is sort of sad, self-invalidation and people-pleasing. And this is very specifically important in this framework here. Self-invalidation is the concept of not listening to yourself. So it's like your opinion gets dismissed before you even acknowledge you have an opinion. The way this typically plays out is, and I'll give you an example. So I used to be such an intense self-invalidator that I would, like if my pillow was uncomfortable, it would never occur to me to get another pillow. Like that thought would never come into my head, just never. I would be like laying on a flat pillow like forever and like thinking to myself, yeah, this pillow sucks. It never occurred to me. It wasn't until I was in my first master's program, I had a friend. She was a little older than me. She was like in her early 30s. I was young. And she was the opposite. She was vigilant about her needs being met. I mean, it was like, how dare I not have a pillow? And she would spend like an hour finding the right pillow. It wasn't until I saw that in her that I was able to see in me that I never caught those things. That those things all drove me crazy too, but I would never think, because my opinion had been so stepped on that I couldn't hear it anymore. Now, those of us that have this, we may not see it right away, but what we typically do is we're people pleasers. That's one really big symptom of being a self-invalidator. We're like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Or like we're at like dinner and the salt is all the way on the other end of the table, and I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to bother anybody, you know. This will be like someone will say to us, call me, I will be mad if you don't call me. No, I don't want to bother them, you know. So self-invalidators are folks who just do not acknowledge the importance of their opinion. They dismiss it all the time. Now, we do this for a really good reason. One, it's extremely uncomfortable, and if social connection is the law, then this gets us into trouble. Because as children, what do we want? We want to be loved. We want to be validated. Now, if my opinion is different from my dad, and I don't want to make my dad mad, let's say I can see, like, my father's getting irritated because we're at a baseball game and he wants to stay and watch, but I'm starving. I'm really, really hungry. But I can see he's into this game and I don't want to bother him because then he'll be mad, and then he gets in that little attitude when he doesn't, you know, whatever. So I sit in silence. Because to me at that moment, it would be, I can handle my suffering more than I can handle pissing him off. So it's like taking the road of sucking it up because conflict is so uncomfortable. So that's one reason. As you get older, we want to be cool, we want to fit in. So instead of having an opinion about what's cool is good for me, I start trying to figure out what other people think are cool. I want to hang out with those kids. Well, those kids dress like that. So when I go school shopping with my mom before this school year, I say, Mom, I want to wear those clothes. And then when I show up that year, right, it's maybe a little weird because I look different than I did the year before, but who cares, right? I show up, start smoking weed, next thing I know, these are my friends. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what I think as long as I figured out what you think. If I can figure out what he wants from me, then I can show up that way, and then I'll be cool, and then I'll have friends. But that backfires because as I am assessing what you want, I'm not assessing what I want. So we wind up defaulting to two different ways of making decisions. One is what you want, somebody else's opinion who I put before mine, what my parents think I should do, what my friends think I should do, what someone else thinks is cool, or the right answer, the intellectual defense. being right. Well, if I just get more education, if I just know the right answer, in other words, what's the right answer? You guys will know. If you want to succeed in life, what major should we pick in college?
Finance.
Finance. What else?
Engineering.
Engineering. What else?
Yeah, stuff.
Medical.
Law.
Yep. There you go. You just hit the 4, right? So what do? Well, the right answer to what major I should pick is finance. The right answer to what major I should pick is law. The right answer to what major I should pick is medicine. And so, for those of us that are not comfortable enough to validate our opinion, we default to the right answer. So those are how we end up making decisions. And now that can work for a while. By the time you're about 20, though, this backfires terribly. Because now I gotta live my life without anybody else telling me what to do and what to pick. And now we're in trouble. So that's kind of what self-invalidation is all about. Self-consciousness, right? The first cousin of self-invalidation. That one's obvious. You know what that means. That can be paralyzing. The critical narrator, that's the critical inner judge. That's the judging voice. So that's like judging other people, judging me, judging other people. There is a whole world around judgment that is super interesting. Most of the time, what we key into and get really pissed about is really a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. Fear of not getting what we want. Looking into the future and saying, oh, well, I really want to make a lot of money, but, I don't know, like, if I'm a social worker, then I won't make any money, so maybe I should go into social work, maybe I should go into finance. So it's making decisions in the present because of looking ahead and being afraid I won't get what I want sometime there. This causes all kinds of havoc, and some people have this big, it drives their whole life. The victim mentality, we talked a lot about this one already. It sounds a little misleading. Victim mentality, I put the weather next to it because I usually use the weather test. How much does the weather impact your mood? If it does, then you know you have a victim mentality, because in other words, what it means is, and everybody has this to some degree, circumstances dictate how I'm going to feel. So rather than me dictating how I want to feel, I let everything around me determine that for me, and that creates giant negativity bias and lots of very negative wiring, and it's very hard to live happily ever after in that space. And then finally, the problem orientation. So the problem orientation is like the Where's Waldo of the mind. It's like you wake up in the morning, and instead of looking for the good stuff or looking for the solutions, it's waking up and going, okay, where's the problem? 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 These are like the folks that are afraid the next shoe is going to drop at all times, because you've been trained to problem solve as the way to get through life. It's an anxiety mechanism. It's like, well, if I can cut the problem off at the pass, then I can deal with it now and not be surprised by it later. Well, what you don't realize is that when you have that, you're not dealing with problems, you are creating problems all day, every day. You're saying to your brain, I want you to produce as many problems as you can find for me to solve. So what you think is your defense way to handle problems has become you creating problems all day, every day in your life. Not knowing, but that's what the brain is doing. Got to understand, and I would encourage everybody, I'll send you the link to that On-Hill Seth video from yesterday that we only saw a couple clips of. I would watch that. I'd watch it many, many times, the whole thing in its entirety, because he sort of very clearly, in a way that's very easy to hear, explains how literal the brain is and why it is that this concept is hard for us to get. It's so real to us. It's impossible to imagine that I'm causing the problem in my life. Impossible. What do you mean? But look at, no, I can't be doing this. This happened to me. It's really hard to understand this concept. So I would encourage you to spend some time with that. Awareness is all about helping people realize that they are responsible for the life they do not want. That's what it's all about. What we're saying to them, when we start drawing your attention to how you live in the moment, each day, one moment at a time, what we're saying is, you are the cause of this life you do not want. Now, that's double-sided, because that can be harsh and people can get defensive, but if you do it the right way, it's empowering. Because as soon as I acknowledge that I did this to myself, I now have the power to change it. And there's no other way. The only person that can change any of this is me. And this is the kind of thing that I see with clients a lot. Like their parents really feed into this. Mm-hmm. Their parents sort of say, my kid is just chemically imbalanced. Nothing works for him. So in that, I have to have conversations with the parents that you got to stop saying that to your kid, because he feels like the ultimate victim, and he cannot affect change in his life because you keep saying that he can't affect change in his life. You got to stop saying that right now. They don't get to the degree that that's true and to how devastating that is, but that is what has happened. As soon as you buy in, as soon as that kid buys into this story, the narrative that he has this, resistant depression, resistant depression. I forget how it's framed. In other words, his depression is so bad that it resists treatment. Right? Wow. So this poor kid, we just basically totally disempowered him that he can never have a good life. Mm-hmm. And that's what he believes. He believes that it's going to be miserable, and so what's the path of least misery? So, helping people to see how they are responsible for the lives that they don't want gives them the freedom and the ability to change it. It also gives them the motivation to change it as well.
And then how could pharmacology help? Does it feed into this?
How does pharmacology help?
The victim mentality.
Because
I must be depressed if I'm getting antidepressants or something.
Well, pharmacology helps in that. It actually helps in that. First of all, we believe that medicine does something. The concept of a placebo effect, and the basic concept of every medical study every pharmaceutical study, the main point is it has to prove that above a placebo effect, it is functional. That's how every medication makes it to the market.
Yeah.
So the placebo effect is widely understood, and essentially, well, what is the placebo effect? What do you know it to be?
So, I understand it's like no one can really, it's like just a phenomenon of psychology or something. It's almost like a mystery how it even it is. Or comes about, right?
So, no, the placebo effect is exactly what we've been talking about. The placebo effect is how your thoughts affect the cells of your body.
You believe something to be true.
Once you believe something to be true, the cells in your body respond in accordance with that belief. If you believe that chocolate ice cream makes you skinny, the cells in your body, you have to really believe that, not want to believe that. You have to believe that. That have to be the foundation belief. If you believe that the chocolate ice cream makes you skinny, you could eat chocolate ice cream and it could make you skinny. Because belief is so strong, and this is what I was saying about the mind being the governor. The mind is the ultimate governor of the body. And the placebo effect is how we prove that, how you can prove that.
Okay.
Now, the problem is, the advantage to medication is it improves both someone's belief in their ability to get better, because they believe in drugs. Oh, drugs will make me better. And because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to change your mood. So essentially what pharmacology does is it creates a new baseline, a new mood baseline. So whatever your mood average was before, if it was really, really low, if it works, I mean, not all medication does do this, but the idea is that it creates a new mood average, and then you go up that mood scale. When you're up the mood scale, now you have more performance access because your thoughts change. Make sense?
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to mention, this is as good a place as any, the mind is the governor of the body with 3 exceptions. So when you activate the autonomic nervous system sympathetic, okay, when you get in fight or flight, the body takes over the mind, and now there are only 3 things that the mind can do. So you will start thinking in accordance with that activation. So your brain goes to 3 places. 1 is time. How much time is it going to take? How much time is this going to be? And what time is it? In other words, imagine we're running from a lion. One of the things we need to be able to assess under that threat, survival threat, is how much time is it going to take for me to get to safety? do I have the time to outrun this lion? Because I have to make that split-second assessment of what I'm going to do. How am I going to survive this? So time. So if you think about it, when you're stressed out, next time you get stressed, think about what you're thinking about. Because it can only be one of these 3 things. The second is the body. So all things connected to the body, me, my body. So if you think about people that wash their hands, like the OCDers that wash their hands, people pick their hair. I've had clients obsess over how they look. People look in the mirror and I'm fat, I don't like this. They will pick at their skin, right? All of those little twitches that people get from anxiety are body oriented. So the mind gets taken over and goes right to body. And then the last is the environment. So when you think about that phenomenon of trying to figure out what other people are thinking, when we get under threat, we start assessing the environment. We're not thinking about me anymore, we're thinking about, right? What's going on over there? What are they doing? What's that person doing? So those people that have trauma, right? I have a friend who was really early in childhood, very badly traumatized until he was about 6 years old. When he walks outside, everybody is a threat. And on a dime, like as quick as you can say, he can go from, just hanging out with you to attack. I mean, on a drop of a dime. You can see it, he's hypervigilant. His whole body, you can see it. It is very, very clear when somebody has trauma because they have a hypervigilance. Okay, so that's good information for you to know. So, of course, based on what I just told you, if you have anxiety, what's our first order of business? If you have anxiety, what's the first order of business in order to help that person make a change?
Incorporate my rest and...
Got to get them out of activation.
Yeah.
Because they cannot get their mind back. The mind has been trumped by the body. Got to teach them how to bring the body down.
Get into the present mindfulness breath or something.
Right. So, get into the present. Exactly.
It's funny because I used to have issues with anxiety, and having talked about time, body, and environment, that was thinking back to all the times where I would almost have a panic attack. That is exactly the 3 things I was thinking about, and I cannot think of anything else I would ever think about except those 3 things. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Totally. So you get it, right? Awareness is about, like you said, being present. Because there's no threat here. Unless we are under attack, there's no reason to be scared, there's no reason to be activated. So if someone has anxiety, you bring them out of their head and into the present where there's no threat. Absolutely. But you also at the same time want to help them to be able to see when they start to get turned on. So in other words, if you can catch your reactions very early on, they never get any momentum. If I wait until I'm 3 days into a depression cycle to do anything about it, it's going to be a lot harder than if in the very first thought, the negative thought comes, I go, oh, yeah, there's my friend, critical narrator. Let's let that one go. So awareness is all about catching how you are very early on. Okay. The other thing that's important here is awareness is the how. Awareness is how we are doing something. How am I being? Most people, when they come into therapy, what do you think the first thing they want to know is? I mean, this is so like, it's just, this drives me a little nuts, but it's across the board. Like,
How long is it gonna take?
Not in this case, so I didn't ask the question right, but most people get into therapy because they want to know why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Why am I like this, Sam? I mean, why? So usually what I will say to you is, okay, I can tell you why, and it is not going to help you change.
Yeah.
Why is irrelevant? It doesn't mean anything. We can talk about that, and we can go down that road, but it isn't going to make you any different. So if you want to do that, that's fine. But typically what I would say is, can we get to where you want to be first and then talk about why? I'm going to make the distinction between content and process. Content is the who, what, where, why, when, right? Process is how you approach something. Process is, if we were playing chess, process is the strategy that we would employ to play chess. Content is the pieces. Trying to change your life using content is like literally trying to get better at chess by going and buying a different set of chess pieces. Like, it's ridiculous, right? You would never assume that I could win or get better at chess by buying different pieces. Well, this is exactly what most people do. They say, I'm not happy, I'm going to move to another city. My boyfriend's a jerk, I'm going to get another boyfriend. My job sucks, I'm going to get a new job. That'll make me happy. So that's impossible. If you don't change how you engage with the world, you cannot change how. You can't change the outcome. This is the whole point about, if I'm not creating and cultivating happiness as a state of mind, I'm not going to get happiness from a new boyfriend. I might get a little dopamine infusion for a period of time, right? I might go into like be in love until that wears off, in which case he's probably going to look a lot like the last one, because I haven't made any changes. So I'm pulling him into the same patterns as everybody else, which is exactly why I have no desire to be in a love relationship anymore, right? Because I'm not well enough around my love tape to be in a healthy partnership yet. And not motivated to change that yet. All right, so you get it. So this is what awareness is all about. We got to change the how. We got to change the how. Now that you know that when you're stressed, your brain goes to those three things, now you have real information that can tell you when you're stressed. If you hear yourself thinking about how much time you have, I don't have enough time, maybe I'm too old, that's a stress thought. That's not who you really are. The body's scared and it starts telling you this bullshit. It's telling you that because it's scared. That's what it does when it's scared. It's not you, it's fear. Fear is a real, legitimate, it takes the mind over. Now, what do we do about this? Meditation. If they don't like it, then you find creative ways to get them in the state of meditation. You use guided meditation, you use 3-minute meditations, you use gongs, you use waves, you use teeth brushing, you use anything that they will give you as a way to start teaching how to cultivate a meditative state. That's it, because it's only in meditation when we really start to slow everything down that now we can hear our thoughts. Now we can teach people that there's separation between them and their thoughts. I can tell you with 100% certainty that until I was 23 years old, I did not know what the present was. And I couldn't be in the present. It was too uncomfortable. I felt too vulnerable. I would have to control my reactions to everybody. So if you said something funny in a room full of people and I laughed, it would be so horrifying that I would have to somehow keep myself out of the present so that I couldn't laugh or wouldn't look stupid, right? So it just becomes this kind of calculated, it's this vulnerability shield to stay out of the present. And in actuality, though, then you really can't be happy. You can't have the life you want if you can't find the present. You just can't. All the information that you need is here in the present. So here's what alignment means. Alignment has two fundamental factors. This is so important. This is so important. This is really important. Alignment has two fundamental features. The first, when we say alignment, we mean two things. The first is alignment of mind and body in the present. This is the zone for athletes, the flow, being in the now, right? This is that sort of touted sacred space where people are just like, they're sort of, they feel it, right? Like they're in it, and like life is good in that space. Time does weird manipulative things in that space. Like this is it. I never forget, this is how I got into college. I wrote an essay on, just coincidentally, on this one run, a snowboard run, the best tree run I ever took in my life. And when I look back at that essay now, what I was actually describing was being in the flow as I was going through. Just like this flawless, ability to respond immediately, seamlessly to what was coming in front of me, right? So what makes the top tier athletes at the highest levels of performance, what makes, one better than the other is their ability to, on command, access this space. What makes, almost like you could have bet your life on the fact that Derek Jeter's 3,000th hit would be a home run, right? How does he do that? Because the man has mastered the intuition of finding this state. That's it. So you know when you're in it, you know when you're not. And this is really important because when you find this space, this is where we're all trying to get. This is it. This is where the juice of life lives. But the second part of alignment is even more important. Because in order to find the first, or to stay in the first, the second has to be there. So I use the phrase integrity because Immanuel Kant had this great concept of integrity, where essentially what he said was, integrity is when what we do, what we say, and what we think are all in alignment. So when our behavior aligns with our beliefs, that's when you are in alignment. Now, every day, all day long, we have a part of us, and it really is not in our head. This is not a heady part of us. This is a gut part of us. You have a part of you that's communicating to you all the time. It's always telling you what direction to go in. This is your instinct, your intuition, whatever you want to call it. Most of us have worked really hard to train this voice away. This is that self-invalidation. Why might I train this voice away? So let's say that I'm in a relationship. I desperately I'm 33 years old. This is my story. And I'd been in the same relationship for 5 or 6 years, and all I wanted in the whole wide world was a baby. That was it. But in my gut, I know this is not the man I should be having babies with. I know it. I know that we're going to get to, I know this is not the guy. I should never have married him. I knew it 90 days into our relationship, which I know because I met him counting days. 90 days in, I said, this is not the guy. I knew it. We were together for 10 years. 10 years. The entire time, I knew that it was not the guy. Now, why would I stay? Why did I stay? What would you guess? You don't have to know anything to guess.
What is the sunk cost fallacy? I've sunk so much time into this.
Could be, absolutely. Yeah, could be the sunk cost, yeah.
Well, because you had a desire maybe to have a baby and you knew that he could give you that, whether you wanted him or not.
Yeah. Right? How long would it take for me to find somebody else? I gotta move out, we gotta break up our finances, I gotta go through the process of dating, I gotta find somebody else, he's gotta want to have a baby.
Convenience, I guess.
Convenience. Comfort and certainty. I knew he was a good family, right? It comes from, so even though I wasn't in love with him, I knew what I was getting. I was certain of what this was going to be, and I could live with it. Yeah, exactly. It was easier. It was the path at that time that felt easier. It wasn't actually easier. Easier would have probably been a walk away. But it was what seemed like the most convenient. And it was the least scary is really what it was. It was terrifying to think about being on my own. It was terrifying to think about meeting somebody else. So I stayed. Despite knowing the entire time, every single day, this wasn't the man for me. And it was only a matter of time. Now, alignment is very much about listening to that voice and not having to live in that cognitive dissonance. In Alcoholics Anonymous, steps 2 and 3 are really interesting. So, step 1, why am I blanking? Step 1,
our lives aren't manageable.
Yeah, no, wait, right. What's the first sentence, though?
Like, I believe I
just recited it in my head, too.
Alcoholism in my life became unmanageable. Step 2, so step 2 doesn't really matter. Right, step 1 is all about acknowledging. Like, I am an alcoholic, my life became unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of over to the care of God as we understand it. Now, okay, why am I bringing this up? So, steps 2 and 3 are essentially all about alignment. In AA, they say, turn your thinking over to the God of your understanding. Some people use good, orderly direction as God. And I remember I used to ask my sponsor, how do I know the difference between my thinking and God thinking? It used to drive me insane. I would ask this question everywhere that I ever went. It drove me fucking nuts. What ultimately I was asking, I probably knew the answer to, I just didn't necessarily want to know. Inside of all of us is our answers. It's there. It's always with us. And I believe that we know immediately. You know within minutes whether or not this person is someone that you like. You know in minutes whether or not this person is someone you could really like. You know really, really soon, much sooner than we sometimes allow ourselves, because our brain comes in and says, no, I'm going to give him a chance. Like, he's really good looking, he makes good money, and, let's go on a few more dates and see. We talk ourselves, using our big brains, we talk ourselves out of our instincts a lot because it's either inconvenient or we don't want to deal with certain things. But the reality is, lying is what feeds our low self-esteem problem. So alignment, in this case, integrity is all about righting the ship. At the core of these is the I'm not good enough fear. So underneath all of these thought patterns is low self-esteem, desperately low. I'm not good enough. Sort of like Max was saying earlier. I look at my friends and they're making more money than me. That comparing. Again, that's an I'm not good enough phenomenon. Lying is the fuel for I'm not good enough. Invalidating my opinion is the fuel for I'm not good enough. So telling the truth, honesty and honesty with self is absolutely fundamental for alignment and change. You have to be telling the truth to yourself. It's not about honesty with others. Honesty with others is basically really, really helpful because as I said earlier, you're using that grounding of something into physical. So telling somebody else is good, but it's really being honest with you. So if you're at a job that you hate and you keep rationalizing it because you're making good money and you're afraid that you can't work anywhere else, and you keep saying that over and over and over and over and over and over, but you have to go to work every day hating this thing that you're doing, it can't be in alignment. It's not possible. Because there's this part of you that's just growing. There's what's a growing cognitive dissonance. There's a part of you that is moving one way, the other's moving the other, and these things are wrestling each other to the ground. It takes an enormous amount of energy, time, effort, away from all that it is we really want to be doing. We don't even know it. Some people will spend the rest of their lives in this space, active in all of these things. That's life. Life is cognitive dissonance, insecurity and activating those with some moments of being drunk, and so I get some relief. Or a lot of moments of being drunk, so I get a lot of relief. Right? So now I say that with caution. This is where judgment can be really, you can judge yourself really easily here. I just turned 40 years old, and for the first time in my life, I get to live in alignment. It took a long time. And literally right now. 6 months ago, I was at a job that I knew I should not have been at with every fiber of my being. I was sort of dating somebody that I knew I shouldn't be dating. Right? So now I'm free. I'm free of all that. And now everything that I do all day long, I get to live in that space of being aligned. But it's taken a long time. So it's not easy to do this. And we're not trying to do it perfectly. But when we do, this is the important part. When we do, now we find that flow really easily, because all along there's a part of you that's been saying, hey, if you follow you, you're going to go right into what you want. That's the guidance. The guidance is that you telling you, hey, this isn't the right thing, and maybe if you just dumped him, you'll find the guy you really want. But we don't trust it. So the central feature of alignment is trust. Trust is the enemy of fear. Trust is the enemy of fear. Trust looks fear in the face and says, I got this. No, thank you. I don't need you. And that's what we're trying to cultivate when we're talking about alignment. We're trying to find trust in ourselves, faith in ourselves. What gives an athlete the ability to perform at their highest level is knowing I have trained my entire life to be good at this. I don't need to doubt my ability. I don't need to doubt my skill. I know that I have what it takes to be the best goddamn basketball player in the world. And if I just stop overthinking it and I let my body and mind be fully present in the moment and I just react to the flow of the game, I'm going to be the best athlete on that court. But if you think about all those sports metaphors, right, because in sports is the best for this, it's just so clear in a sports setting, and you apply that stuff to your life, it's like instead of playing not to lose, you get to play to win, right? So that's what alignment is all about. And then the last part of allowing. The last part of mindfulness, the last part of our definition of mindfulness is the allowing. Allowing is tricky and can sometimes be the toughest of all. Allowing refers to allowing guilt and shame and fear go, letting them go. Allowing is all about letting it go. It's all about letting it go, letting all of the shit that has been really driving us crazy for a very long time, letting it go and allowing ourselves to be happy. Now, this is important, and it seems so trite, but it's very hard for people to allow themselves to be happy for all kinds of reasons. I think of my mom, right? So she's, early 60s. She won't let herself be happy because she's afraid if she's happy that she'll then be made sad. It's like, so you're going to be sad all the time? Because God forbid you be happy, and it's worse if I trust being happy, then I get sad. It's worse than just knowing I'm going to be sad all the time. It's like insane, right? But that's the thinking. Or I'm such a bad person. I'm not good enough to the point where I don't deserve to be happy. So I'm going to punish myself all the time. Now, ultimately, this is really it's like a decision you can make when you're 7 years old that turns into a habit that by the time you're 60, she just can't get out of the habit. And it feels very real. So now she's just stuck in not allowing happiness. It's just automatic. And then it becomes impossible for her to see a route out of that unhappiness. So allowing is really very, very simple. It really just means allowing our mood to lift. Because our nature is actually, when you're not interfering with the brain stuff and you're really doing the first two, when you're using your awareness, when you're being present, when you're practicing meditation, when you're in alignment, you are allowing yourself to be happy. There's no alternative. You're going to float up. You can't be in the zone and be pissed. Right? That's just like, they don't coexist in that space. So your mood naturally elevates. Your job, though, is not stopping it on purpose. And when you're working with clients, that's what they'll do. They'll start to feel better, and then they'll go, no, I can't feel better.
And they'll sabotage it.
And they'll sabotage it. That's when people say self-sabotage, that's what it means. It means that they were starting to get the good stuff, and it got scary, and so they run away. Okay, so you will continue to hear about the 3 A's of mindfulness a lot because they're going to come up in all kinds of contexts, and eventually we're going to learn how to make these integrated and then use them, how to create interventions to help people get into the space, and then how to teach it to other people and all of that, how to use it when you're working with others. But for now, let me go back to the thing that I gave you guys. So I had asked for two things to be mindful of. The first was your narrative. What's the story? Or what are some of the stories? What are some of the stories that might be limiting you from being the actualized person, living the life that you ultimately want, or even seeing the life that you ultimately want? Oh, that's the other thing. What I see more and more of in the emerging adult population is they've been sort of beat into these thought disturbances to the point where they don't know what they want to do with their lives, and they go crazy trying all these different things because they don't know what they want, and they can't trust their instincts. So they're like, I'm going to try accounting, and then they hate it. And they're like, I'm going to try law, and then they hate it. And then I'm going to try this. So they wind up constantly feeling behind other people because they keep trying to make a square peg fit in the round hole, and then can't get out of that pattern. And their fear of not getting what they want ends up tripping them up. So you've got clients that are 35 years old and still doing the revolving rehab door because they never did it right the first time. They could have circumvented all of that pain and suffering if at 24 they just sort of put their effort into that alignment. Because when you're in alignment and you cultivate trust, you can trust that that your instincts are driving you in the right direction. Instead of trying to intellectually create the right direction, knowing what the right direction is. And this is really important. I mean, understanding that your intellect is not a place where you're supposed to spend all your time. Your intellect is designed to be able to create the life you want. Mm-hmm. But it's your visceral knowing, it's this intuitive space that is supposed to be the driver, not the intellect. Mm-hmm. So our intellectual self interferes, and we can get way too smart for our own good. Really. Okay, guys, any questions? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.